All right, let's get it. So we're doing the wrap-up review with Scotty Prendo. He's been riding the heck out of this bike for the last few months. This is, of course, the Norco Range C2. It's the carbon model, mid-level spec. We'll get onto that a little bit later on. Scotty, I've seen you ride this bike a ton. We've travelled with this bike a ton. How long have you had it for, and how much riding have you been doing on this thing?
Yeah, like I've had this bike for a while now. I've probably done excess of probably a couple hundred hours aboard this bike. So suffice to say that I've definitely put this bike through its paces, ridden it in a variety of locations, and yeah, right from the onset, I really like this rig.
Mate, one of the things that really sets this Norco about, it's one of the most popular bikes. We know the back orders on this thing right across Australia are off the charts. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of riders across Australia got one of these or have one of these on order. So clearly a bike that a lot of people like. One of the things that makes the bike super unique, obviously, is its high pivot and idler, virtual pivot point. Tell us a bit about the concept, having experienced it and spent a lot of time kind of digging teeth in it, and then, you know, concept and how it actually rides.
Yeah, like even from the onset, if you've checked out our review on Revo already and the previous intro we had with this bike, right from the onset, I was really blown away by the concept of the virtual high pivot. In short, or in layman's terms, without getting into all the tech talk, the whole concept behind the high pivot is essentially to stop chain growth and to stop pedal kickback as well. So in a sense, what it's doing is under load or under braking, and with the rearward axle path. The rearward axle path essentially gets the rear wheel out of objects and that quicker. So the concept behind that is because it's getting out of the way faster, it's not getting hung up on all those square edges along the trail, so you're going to maintain momentum a lot easier. But also with the lack of chain growth and under load and under braking, you're going to have a more supple and a more active rear end as well. So one thing that's going to do is make your bike feel a lot more composed, which it does, and it's going to make braking in the rear end a hell of a lot better as well, which is exactly what it does.
So concept and marketing hype aside, in the real world, does the high pivot and idler make a big difference?
Yeah.
And does it chew the trail up, or does it smooth it out? What's it kind of do, and how does it feel when you're actually on board this thing up at speed?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, you point this thing in a straight line, and it actually feels like a mini downhill bike. So when you're really hitting the rough stuff and you're really hitting all those edgy sections and whatnot as well, two things I've really noticed is, yeah, it does maintain momentum really well. But when you're actually hitting all that loose chatter and all those sort of hard impacts through corners and whatnot as well, the bike feels super composed, so you get a lot more traction to the rubber below. So look, overall, the best way to describe this bike, I find, is it's probably not an enduro bike. It's definitely not a downhill bike. It's probably something in between. So for you more gravity fed riders out there who really want a bike that can ride uphill, but you want something that is really gonna, you know, you can be super aggressive with downhill, then this is the rig for you.
Because we saw, like, last week we were in Threadbow. I think you've had it at Threadbow a couple of times.
Yep.
We went up the coast, we did a big road trip, we rode some burly stuff up there. Yep. What kind of rider? Now, you said it's based as an enduro bike with a very much kind of leaning on the heavier gravity side.
Yep.
But what style of rider would you say is kind of this bike tailored to? And who's Norco kind of designed this one? What style of rider do you think has this written on?
Yeah, look, I mean, one thing with this bike, if you were, there's such a variety of bikes you can ride for specific disciplines in the bike market, as everyone knows these days. So one of the things with this, if you were to own or buy one bike and you want to do a lot of pedaling, it probably isn't the bike for you. However, if you are into your gravity fed riding and you want a bike that you can definitely pedal to the top of the hill, no worries. You can go do shuttle runs, you can go to Threadbow and do chairlift runs, or wherever. You can pack it up in a bike box and go to Whistler and huck part laps and ride technical stuff. I mean, I've ridden everything from super technical trails, super fast trails, and it really is a beast on the descents. With that said, I mean, it's no XC bike, but for what this is, like 170mm travel front, 170mm travel back, a coil on the back, 29-inch wheels, a big, long, burly bike, it actually goes up hills really well.
That's one thing I noticed in your review. You said you're taking on a couple of sort of 30-odd kilometre rides. How does it pedal? Does that extra long chain and everything kind of like end up bringing a little bit of lag into the system, or is it actually kind of pretty efficient? I mean, we just said it's got a lot of travel and it's got a coil shock.
Yep.
Does it still get you to the top of the hill?
still gets you to the top of the hill. I mean, one of these things which I found with it is when you're riding this bike, you're never going to win the cross-country race. But if you go out and you cut laps and you're just patient and you can sort of just sit and spin up the climbs and you can take your time, if you do sort of up the ante a little bit, you're going to get gassed pretty quickly because, yeah, it is a big, burly, slack bike. But as I just said before, with that said, for what it is, it actually climbs remarkably well. And trust me, when you get to the top of the hill and you point it downhill, it's all worth it. It definitely puts a smile on your eye for sure.
Right. Mate, one of the things that we have seen a ton of you in videos and whatnot, and obviously I ride with you a lot, one of the things I know you really love is hitting big jumps, big scary jumps. How's this thing go in the air, mate? Have you sent some gaps on the range?
Yeah, like we're definitely on some of our local trails. A couple of the young whippersnappers and obviously one of the other test riders, Blake, who I do a lot of my riding with as well. He definitely keeps me on my toes with some of the very larger gaps around here. So yeah, mate, for me, I'm not the best jumper in the world. I don't pretend to be, but I tell you what, for a big burly bike, I mean, it does jump more akin to a downhill bike. So on some of the really fast big gaps and whatnot as well, super stable in the air, like really, really composed. Yeah, I love it. Awesome.
Mate, one of the things we have to touch on, it goes out saying, when we've been out and about with this bike, it does grab a lot of attention. Aesthetics of this thing are off the chart. It looks great,
yeah,
you know, when you see it in the mag or when you see it on the internet, but in real life, this frame, it's burly, there's no denying that.
Yep.
Brown colourway, we dig that too, but let's talk about the actual carbon, let's talk about the lines.
Yep.
I really like how the shock's nestled nice and low, keeping the centre of gravity nice and low, punches through the seat tube there as well.
Yep.
Run us through some of the little frame details and bits and pieces you really notice when you look at this bike in the flesh.
Yeah, look, overall, like, you know, I haven't really had too many people say, some people say they you know, they're not sure on the actual concept or the look of the bike. Personally, I love it. I reckon it looks amazing. I was down in Thredbo a couple of months back when we first got our hands on this and actually hadn't sold too many. So, and I got endless comments about like, wow, like that's a cool looking bike. And mate, I agree, like the thing is super, super cool. One thing, like you just said, is how all the shock mount and everything is set down really, really low. I mean, that just isn't done for aesthetics alone. I mean, obviously it's done for performance. Keeping all that weight really lowers the center of gravity, making the handling of the bike a lot better as well. But yeah, as you said, like all the frame design, all the integrated cabling and whatnot as well. All the jockey wheels, the shock, even like all the linkages and that are all CNC'd and that as well. The drive chain, everything is extremely neat. And due to all those little sort of attentions to detail, you'll find when you actually ride this thing is really, really quiet as well. So a lot of bikes, you get a little bit of cable rattle, and this thing is super quiet. And I've actually had a few comments on how quiet it is.
Now, we talk about this quite a lot with the bikes we review. As riders these days, we are kind of sport for choice. Manufacturers are really up in the ante when it comes to size-specific geometry and little features like this, which we're starting to expect on a you know, high-end carbon bike. But Norco really upped it with this bike. It's got size-specific geo, which essentially means the rear end is growing as the sizing goes from small through up to XL. But then with this bike, the seat tube actually gets a little steeper as well, the bigger the size. So I guess the bigger the rider, they want to keep that center of mass central, so you're not floating too far over the back wheel, wanting the XL versus small. Run us through how the geo package of this bike feels, the reach and some of the figures. Yeah, how does it feel? Because you're a pretty tall guy. What are you, 6'2"?
Yeah, 6'2".
6'2".
Yeah, look, so again, like, you know, from all the way from like a small up to, you know, an extra large like this one as well. And you'll see this with a lot of brands and a lot of bikes now, that actually do change a little bit with the head angles, seat tube angles, the rear ends on the bikes, the reach and whatnot as well. So the cool element to that is each change is going to slightly change the kinematics of the bike and the feel of the bike as well. But the whole concept behind that is actually you almost getting a custom fit bike for the size of the rider you are. So again, I'm 192 centimeters tall. I'm about 90 kilos. So, but however, I run my setup a lot differently to other people. I run my bike pretty stiff, and I like my bike to feel pretty planted. But other people are different. But with that said, due to those little subtle changes, it does give you a larger scope on how you can actually customize the bike to, you know, fit exactly your riding style, which is awesome.
Alright, so we touched on before, this is the C2 version. This is the mid, there's basically 3 models of range coming to Australia. This is the mid-spec level. Retail price on this bike is $8,999, $9,000. The C3, which is the entry level, I guess you'd say, same carbon frame throughout all three, though, mind you, $7,500, and then the top of the line is 11. Now, run us through the spec. What are you getting for your $9,000? Where does it sit in comparison to other bikes on the market? I would say it looks like it represents good value for money, but curious to hear what you think, and if there's if Norco kind of knocked it on the head, do you reckon, with this spec?
Yeah, look, I mean, depends on your flavour in relation to a lot of components. I mean, some people prefer Shimano, some people prefer SRAM, RockShox, and a variety of different things. So, it is pretty cool that across the board that they've come in with a variety of components. This one I really, really like. I mean, got the new Z Ultimate fork up front, the new X2 Fox shock in the rear, 12-speed SRAM drive chain, co-brakes, and it got DT hubs, E13 hoops, overall Maxxis tyres. I mean, overall, there's things that you might change, there's things that you might not want to change, but overall, personally, I think out of the box, this thing is a super good build. Yeah,
mate. As you said, this is the wrap-up review. It wouldn't be a wrap-up review without giving us kind of an overall impressions. How does the C2 rack up compared to other kind of big mini downer bikes, if you want to call it, single crown forks? How many tins of beer out of 10 would you give the Norco Range C2?
Well, it's a bit hard to sort of, put like tins of beer on it, only because, different bikes are different personal preferences. For the type of riding I like to do, mate, 10 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed riding this thing. I know Bryn was out here hanging out with you a while ago. He's just got his new range as well, and he obviously loves his one as well. Mate, I can't disagree with him. I mean, for a bike you can pedal uphill if you're a gravity-fed guy and comes from a downhilling background like I do, but want a bike you can pedal, then this thing is ideal. Man, there's nothing about this bike I could really, fault. Every time I swung a leg over it, I really, really enjoyed riding it. And I tell you what, if you want a bike that's going to put a smile on your dial when you hit the descents, then you can't go past the new Norco Range.
Boom. Well, there we have it. So obviously you can read up more of Scotty's trail notes in the latest edition of the mag. Head on down to your local Norco store or jump online to norco.com to check out more and to put your name on the list. That is our wrap up of the Norco Range. We're going to have plenty more bikes from Norco coming out throughout this coming year, so keep an eye on the YouTube channel and keep an eye on the Revo mag. Cheers.